Hello and welcome to the DME podcast, brought to you by DME, the podcast booking platform. Whether you're a podcaster or an aspiring guest, the DME app is a perfect platform for you to get booked and manage your podcast bookings. I'm your host, Sukhay, the founder of DME, and on this podcast we'll be discussing the latest news and views in tech, the ins and outs of entrepreneurship, and even dipping our toes into the adrenaline-filled world of mixed martial arts. On this episode, we're speaking with Alka Sehgal Cuthbert. Alka is a former teacher and academic who went from writing about the education system to standing as a candidate for the Brexit Party, and is now a director of Don't Divide Us, an organisation that promotes freedom and tolerance when countering societal prejudice. Really enjoyed this conversation. I do apologise, there were a couple of audio glitches in the recording software, but that's something we'll fix with DME when we build our own. And about halfway through, Harriet Tubman is the name of the American abolitionist whose name I annoyingly forgot. But I really hope you enjoy the episode.
Alka Sehgal Cuthbert, welcome to the DME podcast. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for inviting me.
No problem. Really appreciate you joining the podcast. I know we're quite young and burgeoning in the podcasting world, but thank you for coming along. So the reason I invited you onto the podcast, obviously I'm familiar with you on the old Twitter sphere there and some of your work and some of your opinions. So I thought we'd kind of get you on the podcast and kind of find out a little bit more about you, if that's okay. So first of all, the name is unique and I like it. So
okay, so my name.
Yeah, so Alka Sehgal Cuthbert, is that right?
That's right. Yeah, the first two parts, Alka Sehgal, is my maiden name. Both parts of it are from India. I don't know what they mean. My parents were Hindus, not particularly practicing, but so I'm assuming the names sort of Hindu Indian names, and the Cuthbert bit is my married name, which is very English. Yeah.
So I was anticipating about Caribbean in the Cuthbert name, but okay, maybe not.
No, not that I know of. Anyway, I haven't done one of those DNA testing things, you know.
Yeah, they're quite scary a little bit. It would be really interesting, but then I think some of the mystery behind your origin is probably there left you on to find out. So I really don't have that in ancestry. Career, I read, is your background is as a teacher, English teacher, is that right?
That's right. Yes. I've worked in education for over more years than I care to remember, but definitely over 35. And started out as a classroom teacher in secondary school, an English teacher. But then gradually, as I kind of combined teaching with further studies, I've been also moved into lecturing. Mm-hmm. And I've worked in many sectors really, higher education, further education, and state secondary. Those are my main things. Oh, and also more recently, a kind of supplementary school for primary aged kids, little ones, which was very enjoyable. So all that time I've been I've done that alongside studying education and also writing about education academically and also for more professional and political publications. So,
okay, so quite a storied career then. So over the course of your teaching career, what kind of changes did you notice from when you first started to kind of when, are you still teaching or have you left the profession now?
No, I don't have time anymore, and I think in some ways it's a sort of the actual teaching is a young. I didn't. I mean, one of the main reason why I decided to put time and effort and money into doing my doctoral thesis on philosophy and sociology of education was precisely because I returned to teaching in schools after looking after the kids when they were younger, and I was so shocked at the changes I saw in schools. And I did supply teaching, so I wasn't just at one school. I worked several schools, so it wasn't just a one-off. Plus, also obviously, lots of friends are teachers, and they were telling me similar things. That there was a real sort of it was becoming like an unspoken Wild West. Really, teachers were no longer really confident about teaching the subjects that most of us think are taught at schools. The subjects themselves, which were being reinterpreted from various places, exam board specifications, the national curriculum, professional associations, was not producing a fine thing of beauty. It was just producing an incoherent mess of curriculum content that teachers were being left on their own to kind of get on with as best as they could. And so in that situation, combined with a situation where in wider society you have a sort of weakening adult authority, where kind of you can see it all around you on trains and in parks and that, where you see young people kind of obviously misbehaving and the adults are not quite sure what they should do. Should they say anything? Should they not say anything? And this, of course, is really awful for a classroom and for a teacher. So, and it was just, a whole load, there's a lot been written about and complained about the micromanaging administrative work that teachers have to do. And that is certainly true. And there's a lot said about the hours and the workload and the pay, all of which are true. But for me, the main thing was kind of most of that would be bearable if you could just do the job that you wanted to do, which was teach a subject that you love. Mm-hmm. And increasingly there were things mitigating against that. And I decided I couldn't find any reasonable explanation in the press and in sort of main public discourse, which was why I decided to try and study it academically to see if I could get some answers.
Okay, so was that like a steady theme that you studied with, of course, from very bad career? You would have seen that through different Department of Education heads, different governments. Was that a consistent downward spiral or downward slope?
Yeah, well, I think it's certainly cross-party. It's not confined to any one political party. I think there was an attempt. I think really what happened was that in the 1988 Education Reform Act and then the subsequent equivalent in higher education might have been well-meaning attempts at reform and to try and bring some rigour into what was seen as a massive, progressive, far too lax education. But it actually unpicked so many really important relationships that have been established since 1947. Mm-hmm. And it kind of often confused rigour with a kind of empirical orderliness. And they're not the same thing at all. And from about that time, you can really see a change in the content of the curriculum. You can see a change in the way exams were written. So, for example, history and English literature exams no longer had essay questions. Instead, the information would be chunked up into little pieces. One part would be 6 points, another part would be 2 points. Right. And that kind of fragmented thinking really kind of is an intellectual lowering of standards, really. Children are not being asked or expected to synthesize information and then articulate it into a logical argument.
Right. So you kind of hear this phrase a little bit like people educating. They want to teach kids how to think, not what to think. Or is that the opposite way around?
Right. Yes, you really need to. It's a very difficult, complex process, which is why we keep them in schools for quite a long time, because it takes quite a while to move into sort of everyday concrete thinking into more abstract thinking. And, you do it through, teachers have traditionally done this through teaching content that is quite closely linked to academic content, which is not like to say you're teaching quantum physics to 8-year-olds, but the kind of subject is shaped by the rules and the standards of the academic discipline. Yeah. But that's been moved out more and more of the educational landscape, and instead you've got a whole crowd of different organisations and actors in there influencing what should be taught. And so it's a right pig's ear, in my opinion. It's a real mess.
Yeah. So where is your academic work then, studying that? Where did that influence come from, do you think? Was it a multiple layered level of influence, or was it kind of one zenith or one controlling force upon that?
No, I don't think it was one controlling force. I mean, some people, particularly from the left, would like to say it was the government, dictating everything. And I mean, the national curriculum is written by Gove and then subsequently by other ministers. It's certainly been kind of more explicit and clear, but that's been in the processes more than the actual content. In fact, that's been the problem. They have very few people are prepared to say this is what should be taught. I mean, there are a couple of exceptions. So, for example, at primary level, there's a lot of emphasis on grammar, so you must teach prefronted adverbial sentences by the time they're in year 4 or whatever it is, which is a bit of a silly, for anybody who understands language and how children develop language and acquire language or love literature would know that's a pretty daft way of approaching it. But in most other places, there's just it's left up to a combination, usually the professional associations, people like the National Association of Teachers of English, for example, or National Association of RE Teachers, but mainly exam boards, especially from from the ages of 14 to 16. Most schools are most concerned and have their eyes focused on what are the exam specifications. Yeah. And that's where the changes in the exam boards has been particularly harmful, because they themselves are far from robust enough intellectually to provide teachers with proper guidance, really. So it's
there's the kind of the school league tables and the constant grading of schools against one another. Is that part of the problem as well, do you think?
Do you know, I think it probably is, because I'm thinking about, when I was at school, maybe when you were at school too, it's like it never occurred to anybody to look up schools performances, right? You just went to the local school, and that was it. And so that's not to say that you can't improve, that we should go back to then, without thinking. But I don't think the league tables have done the job they were intended to do. I think they've had a lot of possibly unintended negative consequences. I think they've encouraged a widespread, they've kind of normalised a distrust of schools. Normally, it's like encouraging parents to treat schools as if they were like buying a car or something, a consumer good, rather than a very unique and special kind of place where their children go to learn all kinds of knowledge and learn that they couldn't learn at home or from everyday life, and they go to have special relationships with their teachers and kids who they might not like, they want to choose to be friends with, but that's an introduction to adulthood. You have to work with people you don't necessarily like,
Absolutely. Yeah, so I think I get my view of the school through my own 3 kids at the moment, and kind of various stages in secondary school and just bordering on secondary school, and seeing the competitiveness between the parents of all things. I mean, my wife kind of takes care of this side of things more than I do, but going through the 11 plus, for example, and it's like even before that, it's like we used to get to the catchment area, and then you've got there's 2 outstanding schools, but it becomes a better one because they're all outstanding. Right? So, and then it's like, well, does it just devalue the outstanding menu? Okay, let's look at their HSE grades. And then they change the percentages, and the change of, it's not A's or B's anymore, it's 8, 9s and 10 with them, they're all A's. How does that work?
That's right. Yeah, there's been huge grade inflation, and I mean that comes from on top. That comes from the rewarding of degrees, and it ripples down into schools. And I mean, more latterly, you've had the intrusion of sort of a more directly political intrusion through the third-party organisations of equity, diversity, and inclusion, and they I think they risk doing quite serious harm to the whole idea of education and to the spontaneous way kids have of just getting on with each other, and they like and dislike people for all sorts of reasons. I don't, even if kids, they sort of say, oh, kids see colour, and it's like shock horror. It's like, so they see colour, they see colour like they see football teams or, big ears or little ears or something like that. It's only, I think by kind of really really pushing for an official normalising of seeing skin colour in schools is really pretty disgusting, actually. I'm very disapproving of it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I went to school a long time ago, 20 plus years, but obviously I was in a quite fairly mixed school, but I mean, there's always obviously tension between different groups, but people are kind of, it's a natural grouping where you kind of circle, you kind of surround yourself with people who are a little bit like you, but there was never mass quarrels or benefits or even little ones between different people of different colours. Obviously, everyone pick on each other for being a ginger-haired kid or a long-haired kid or whatever it was. There's always a reason to pick on somebody else, right? Whether they're wearing glasses or not, or they comb their hair a different way. But I've never experienced things on a race-based basis, and like permeated from the school itself. I mean, last summer I went on some school tours from New London for my son and looked at some stores. One of the schools we went to, like a local one, it was nil upon nil of Black American history. And I thought, students at this school is probably around about 60 or 70% Indian for a start. There's no black kids in the school, but the black British kids. The white hands, because they have Native American slaves.
Yeah. I mean, it's ludicrous. I mean, it's not only is it kind of really not relevant to British history. It's not really about history. This is a political one. It is I mean, it's not to say every teacher in the school is a political activist.
No.
But it is to say that there are political activists who are in key positions of authority in the teacher education training colleges, for example, within the subject professions, certainly within the unions. And the people that don't agree with it are, for whatever reasons, not speaking out enough, or there aren't enough of them speaking out. But no, that's terrible, especially when you think that Britain actually has, as well as having been a colonialist, Britain actually has a very good, mixed, like most countries, I expect, a history that is good and bad, and has actually had a lot of space for social solidarity between immigrants coming into the country from way before Windrush, right from the late 19th century onwards, really. And that's all ignored.
Well, I think it's ignored, but I think all the kind of the BBC programme I'm seeing, I see an article every so often where they found a 10,000-year-old skeleton. Oh, yes, just for the black man from Africa. Really? From a skeleton?
It's a bit desperate, isn't it?
So, okay, fair enough, if you say so. But yeah, there's a funny movement going on. So I think you stepped into politics, I believe, what was that, 2015, 2016?
Yeah, with Brexit, Brexit Party. So
There must have been quite a fraught decision you may have made, or was it just feel like a natural progression and you kind of stand up and say something? Or
no, it wasn't. It was not a natural progression at all for me to go into the Brexit Party led by Nigel Farage. My political formation was from the left when I was younger.
Okay.
I was part of the Revolutionary Communist Party. My dad was in the Labour Party. But you see, what happened was during the course of my studies, my PhD studies, I looked at a lot of policy documents. I did a historical comparison, and I could see that in education there was a real deterioration in content that was correlated with increasing outsourcing of policy to transnational organisations. Mm-hmm. So the reports that were really thoughtful and well researched and written in plain English, and so that everybody could understand them, were the reports that were written by national politicians responsible for education. And there was a particular institution that was cross-party and sat across governments. So it really helped create a bit of an insulation, and education was like political football. But that ended in 1967, and increasingly as Britain became closer involved in the European Union, huge sections of its social and education policy was also being sort of influenced by transnational rules and advice and guidance and reports rather than national ones, and it was not going well. So for that reason, I thought the question of democracy was real, and democratic accountability was really foremost in my mind. And then with Brexit, so that was there. And then when it looked like the government might, ignore the vote again for the third time, I was just thinking, this is mad. How can Britain, the kind of bastion of democracy, and I'd also been going back to India a few times at that point, and you look around the Nehru Museum and you can see how important democracy, that ideal of democracy, had been for Indian development, India's historical independence. And I thought, you can't, if the British government does this, they're really trashing an ideal that has been so inspirational. And goodness knows what the people of Britain will think, if they just are kind of out. So those were the reasons. And I just thought, also there was a lot of slagging off of people who were pro Brexit.
Yeah.
And I thought I just in Cambridge to sort of be honest and open about what I, step up to my political belief at that time, which it still remains, which is, I'm a Democrat. I think it's the best thing we've got. And I think we really need to be much more careful in understanding what is needed for democracy to be something real rather than just a rhetorical flourish, sort of, and trashing people's votes for the third time isn't one way of doing it, that's for sure.
Yeah, because the thing about that, I remember that period, and even before the Brexit vote, I think I'd always kind of been a little bit anti-Europe. Just growing up, we used to get headlines about bent bananas or bananas and two bent. All this silly little EU regulations. And kind of as a teenager, you don't pay much attention, kind of more interested in playing football and going out and all that kind of stuff. But those in the back of the mind, it doesn't really seem right, and I kind of wasn't really following politics or social science and anything like that. And it's kind of comes in 2015, they're talking about the voting acceptance. Oh, okay. And all the online stuff was out, it'd be a walk-in, we'll vote to remain. I thought, yeah, probably. And it wasn't until one Saturday, I think we took a trip down the M40, just driving back there, 100 miles. And you just saw, it's surrounded by farmland, the M40, and you just saw trailer after trailer and sign after sign saying, Brexit, we want out, Brexit, blah, blah, blah. It wasn't called Brexit then, we don't know, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And, not it mean, that's what it was. I thought, wow. And I saw one sign saying remain or whatever it was. I thought, I remember counting, it's about a 13-1 ratio. And I thought,
wow.
The way the media was saying. When the vote came in, I thought, I was surprised it was that close, 52-48, whatever the final count was.
Yeah.
All right. Wow. Something's actually might change. You've actually got a chance of something changing because you're going to get the successive governments you've lived under. Maybe I was kind of came into knowledge a little bit, but at the end of Thatcher, I was about 10 years old or whatever, then you see most of my adolescence was kind of dominated by Tony Blair's Labour government. And you go, okay, that's all one thing. And I think most of our generation kind of looked at Labour and it was like free higher education. And I think by the time I left, by the time I left higher education, they were paying people to go to sixth form or further education. I thought, it's ridiculous. I don't understand. And then that I was like, okay, maybe it's going to be some change now. Actually, change. But that couple of years just was so crazy and non-stop votes and re-votes, and it's absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, I can understand your motivation for actually came from stop this, we became soldiers, we're going to have to do something about it. So where did you stand? Did you stand in Cambridge, and I take your own local?
No. I stood in East Ham, which is where I had lived for quite a long time, and it was really such an important experience to just. I realised how much I myself had been in my bubble, and like you, I picked up on the popular sentiment. I mean, teenagers around where my mum lives, which is like in the suburbs of London, quite ordinary, boring place. Not much. There's a co-op and a post office, and that's about it. And at the bus stop, teenagers were talking about it, and I thought, blow me, when have you ever heard teenagers talking about something political? So I guess that meant that in their household, people must have been talking about it. So, like you sort of thought, well, this just has to go through, Sorry, what was your question? I forgot. Sorry.
Oh, what's the next one? It's like I've forgotten it myself. But kind of 8 years on, how do you feel? How do you feel Brexit's gone in general, and more importantly, kind of on your own area of expertise on the education system?
Well, first of all, I never saw Brexit as a sort of end point. I saw that as a very unique moment. And it was a single issue thing which could cohere that alliance of the Brexit Party. And we did what needed to be done then. But I knew it could never really go much further because there was no policy. You know, if we'd have started discussing policy, it would have fallen apart. You know, we just...
It's a single issue.
Yeah, so it's a single issue. So, but it was like, you know, you have to... You know, to use my gardening metaphor, you know, when you've got kind of frosted up ground, you need to crack it open and then before you can start digging and planting things. So I thought that was that first very important blow. And, you know, it was really, really important because for the first time, I think for 20, 30 years, the political classes got a shock. You know, they could not have it all their own way. For years, they had been just doing all this manoeuvring with the EU and Brussels and United Nations, blah, 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 blah. And everyone had just kind of kept their heads under and gone on with their lives, not liking things very much, but kind of quite depoliticised and atomized. Yeah. And then for me, it was like, well, you know, British people are back on the stage of history, whether you will leave or remain, you know, both sides were acting, they're using their agency. And then there were hopes when the Conservatives got that massive, you know, the massive votes from the Red Wall areas. And blow me if they didn't do what we thought they would do, is just kind of like squander it totally, you know. And in a way, that wasn't surprising because, you know, you just got to, you know, if you just look at the way political life and culture in Britain had been for the preceding 2 decades, you could see the rot. So where was a new party with vision going to come in? You know, we thought, you know, you might have thought for a second the Conservatives would do it, but really, Boris Johnson and, you know, there's other people, and they were technocrats, really, you know.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's, you know, they weren't really Democrats, and that's what we desperately lack at the moment, I think, really.
So you then joined an organisation. Did you join the organisation, or did you find Don't Divide Us?
I did. I came to it. Because some friends of mine had written an open letter in the Spectator, I think it was, in the summer of 2020, after the Black Lives Matters, when a lot of people were hearing from very concerned parents and a few teachers about returning back after lockdown and being told, instead of being advised on, you know, how you can get children back and excited about being in school again, they were being told to go and check their white privilege, or, you know, go and check their black oppression at school and things like that. So it started off as just online meetings, and then I think it was because I'd been a teacher for such a long time and I was studying, you know, kind of knew about education. It is, you know, it is a thing I know quite a lot about. So I kind of became directly sort of leader of that, if you like, or director of that. And then we kind of, just after about a year and a half of working purely on a voluntary basis, we got some donation, you know, some funding from a generous donor, and we kind of tried to professionalise a bit with a website, and, you know, it's very, very, very part-time. But I think it's very important that there is a space in the public debate for the message that Don't Divide Us puts out, which is to, you know, a very a universalist and common sense approach to race, rather than a critical justice informed race outlook.
So how do you go about kind of achieving some of those goals? It seems like a mammoth mission statement, and you'd be fighting against a massive tide, trying to change it. An incremental approach.
Yeah, well, you know, we're not going to sort of barricade the DFE tomorrow. Quite a lot of us are quite old for a start, but there's a surprising number of young people that are interested in what we have to say to it's a combination of anything and everything, honestly. So, so it's not. It's very much evolved, you know, in a kind of feedback responsive way. It's not like I've got a great plan there. It's like you can see, okay, you say things, people respond to what we say, you talk to them, develop a conversation from the press to the, certain politicians, their advisors. You know, we write things. We've produced 2 very good reports, if I say so myself, on the sort of examining the role of these third-party organisations, because they are, you know, nobody has any schools to come in and give them brownie marks for being anti-racist when really they're telling them to really be racist, actually. It's madness. And nobody knows what they're doing. Nobody knows who they are. There's no checks on the qualifications of these people or their experience or suitability to be in schools at all. So
you're trying to forget it's right. You're trying to be a counterweight to those kind of influences, really, and I'll bring the
that's right. That's right. Yeah, I mean, you know, we try. I mean, we try different things. I would love to be able to be producing resources for schools, but we ourselves just don't have the resources for that. And I think there's to come across, you know, just things like, you know, why is a major London theatre agreeing to have blackout nights? And not that,
it's got to be last week, wasn't it?
Yeah. Why is the Church of England, you know, spending an awful lot of money for 3 years to put a team in place? Not the Church of England. I shouldn't say it's the General Synod of the Church of England. I think the parishioners probably don't know or wouldn't really know, you know, aren't interested in what's going on. But they're paying all this money for a racial justice team. I mean, for goodness sake, this is the Church of England. Justice is God's justice, right? Not racial justice.
Yeah, I didn't see those discussed in the Bible, and I've read it much, but yeah, many of the passions I'm familiar with. I don't see racial justice mentioned too much. But,
yeah, you know, it's not in the commandments.
So I've also seen that you've written quite a bit. I saw kind of a series of articles that you've done for Spiked Online as well, around identity politics.
Yes, that's right. Oh, yeah, Spiked and and then other professional things as well. But Spiked, I write for quite frequently. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and you've also done a couple of teaching books that I've seen. What should schools teach and discipline subjects on the pursuit of truth?
Yeah, that's kind of that's an academic / professional book, and it's really making a case for knowledge to be returned as at the heart of the educational enterprise. Really, not social justice, not economic literacy, not life chances, because all those things are things that you do as an adult, and you choose. It's what you choose to do as an independent, autonomous adult. Really, it's not things that you get children to do at the age of 8 and 9 and 10. Right? It's like what you said. You know, if you want them to be able to think independently, then you need to give them provide an education with the kind of content that best allows that to happen. And it's not social just critical race theory, and it's not financial literacy, and it's not healthy eating or going out on Greta Thunberg type protests either. You know, it's pretty much the traditional things that you and I would probably think of as what you do when you go to school, really.
Yeah. I couldn't wait to get out of school, really, more than anything, but yes.
Well, you're not alone. You're not alone, but it's not about what you want. You're a kid. You don't know. It's the adults know.
So those books still in publication? Where can our listeners can find those books? Are they available on Amazon?
Well, the academic book is available online. It's open access.
Oh, awesome!
So if you Google it, it's University of London Press. But I mean that it's not for the general reader, right? So will you? But the things I've written for Spiked or for Teach Secondary are all online. If you just anyone wants to find out, they can Google it and get a list of articles that I've written.
We'll link them all in the description of the episode. But I just wanted to thank you for coming on the DME podcast. I really appreciate your time. So best of luck with your future endeavours with Don't Divide Us, and happy to support you in any way we can.
Thank you so much. I'll be in touch, and it's lovely to meet you. And thank you for inviting me.